Welcome to the recorded version of Home Safety for Older Adults, part of the Family Caregiver Support webinar series brought to you by the American Society on Aging and a generous sponsorship from Home Instead Senior Care.
Okay, our presenter today is Lakeland Hogan. Lakeland is a gerontologist and caregiver advocate for Home Instead Senior Care. Lakeland works to educate professionals, families, and communities on issues older adults face. She is a doctoral candidate at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, where she is studying social gerontology. She has a Master of Arts in Social Gerontology and a Master's in Business Administration from UNO. Lakeland has professional experience in the private and public sectors of senior care services. She has worked on special projects for UNO's Department of Gerontology and the local area agency on aging. Lakeland serves as Vice President of the Board of Directors for the Dreamweaver Foundation and is active in the Alzheimer's Association's Walk to End Alzheimer's. Lakeland has a passion for helping others, especially aging adults and their families. And with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to our presenter here today, Lakeland Hogan. Thanks for being here, Lakeland.
Thank you so much, Steve. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today on this important topic of home safety for older adults. This is one of those really important topics that correlate to the quality of life for older adults as they age. We know that the majority of older adults want to age in place, but in order for them to do so, they're going to have to make some modifications to the home. And we know since this is the Caregiver Support webinar series, this can be a touchy subject for family caregivers to broach with their aging loved one, because sometimes when we talk about home safety, it can be interpreted as a reflection on the older adult's level of independence. They might see it as a little bit of a threat to their independence, but as professionals, what we can help communicate to families and also communicate to the older adults we work with is that by making the home a safer place, a safer environment, it really enhances independence. And that's really the goal, is to help these older adults remain independent and safe in their homes for as long as possible. So if we can kind of approach the topic from that angle, hopefully it will help families have a more positive outcome. And again, just reinforce the topic of safety and help the older adult be a little more open to the conversation. But to get us started, I thought we would briefly go over our objectives for this presentation. So I'll start out by talking about the importance of home safety, give you a little research on home safety from the adult-child perspective, from the older adult's perspective, and even from a physician ER doctor perspective. Then we're going to be talking about the ways that the aging process can impact safety. We know as we age, there are certain things that happen to us physiologically that could impact our safety and in the environment in which we live. Then we're going to talk about warning signs, potential hazards in the home, and talk about ways to improve home safety. And finally, we'll wrap up with some ways that families can communicate around this topic of home safety and also provide you with lots and lots of resources. I think this month I have 4 slides of resources, so hopefully you'll walk away with some things that you can share with family caregivers and those that you work with. So Home Instead Senior Care recently conducted a survey of North American homeowners between the age of 55 and 75. And this research really sought to better understand how older adults are making plans and decisions about their forever homes or where they would like to age. And then through this survey, we hoped to identify gaps in their planning or identify where there is some room for improvement. And our research found that 68% of older adults wish to live in their current homes as they age while also remaining independent. The majority of older adults wish to remain in their own homes, and 78% say they wish to remain there because it's where they're happy and they're comfortable. So when you look at that 68%, you might be wondering, okay, what about the remainder of those individuals? Well, about a third of those surveyed said while the current home they're in isn't where they hope to live, majority of them said they do wish to relocate to a smaller, low-maintenance home, such as a condo, apartment, townhome, duplex, but they still wanted that single-family home feel. So this tells us that home, whether it's the home they've been in for many years or one that they hope to downsize to, people still want a space to call their own. And we know that home is tied to our sense of identity. That's where many people have made memories, raised their children. Often they're familiar with their surroundings. They have their favorite local grocery store, pharmacist, maybe they belong to a local faith community, they're connected with their neighbors. And this, again, is really important to the identity that home has for an individual. And it increases the appeal of staying in that home, in that familiar surrounding, as much as possible. However, we know that many homes, when they were designed, they did not have aging in mind. Fortunately, new homes today, they are putting a little more thought into how a person could age in the home. But for many existing homes out there, they have multiple levels, often with bedrooms upstairs and no full bathroom on the main floor. In the city that I live in, there's a lot of split-level homes where there's lots of stairs. There are older homes that have smaller doorways, steep staircases, staircases without handrails. So there could be a whole variety of reasons that a home might not be conducive to aging in place. But the good news is that there are a lot of modifications that can be made. And we'll be talking more about that in a little bit. But in this same survey, we asked people, have you considered modifying your home to help you age successfully? And the research found that 1/3, only about 36% of those that wish to stay in their current home has thought about making modifications to make it more age-friendly. So a few people have thought about it, but really about half has taken no action at all to ensure that they are able to live in their home as they age. And also, when we think about aging in place, making modifications to the home is a big part of it, but we also know that oftentimes support or assistance will be needed at home in order for the individual to remain there. So often that assistance falls first to the family caregivers, family members, neighbors, friends that step up and help out when the older adult needs a little extra assistance. But also, the great thing about senior care options today is that there's many services that can be brought into the home that can, again, help them stay in place longer. But people aren't really thinking about that aspect of aging in place either. So our research found that only 37% have definite plans to modify their lifestyle to engage in aging in place. So they've thought about staying at home, they want to stay there, but what we're finding is people aren't really thinking about how they're going to make that happen and aren't thinking about the services that they might need to bring into the home. And oftentimes those conversations only happen when there's a crisis. So the great news for us as professionals is we have the opportunity to educate and to encourage proactive home safety as opposed to reactive home safety. But we know that the reason home safety is such a concern for older adults is that many accidents that older adults experience take place in the home. And so part of our research, we reached out to ER doctors, older adults, and adult children about the accidents and injuries that they're experiencing. We know that nearly 20 million older adults aged 65 and older visit the emergency room each year, and almost 1/3 of those visits are related to injuries, and many of the injuries are sustained in the home. So in this Home Instead survey, we reached out to seniors and adult children in both the U.S. and Canada, and we also talked to some emergency room doctors. And of the older adults that we surveyed, well over 1/4 of them, when they had a trip to the hospital or the emergency room, it was caused by a fall or another type of household accident. And then we talked to the adult children, and we asked them to sit down and consider, or we asked if they've ever sat down to consider the safety issues of their loved one in the home, and only 65% of children in the U.S. and about 71% in Canada could think of at least one potential safety hazard. So adult children are starting to think about this a little bit, but with a little more education on what are truly the hazards in the home, hopefully the more likely they'll be able to support their loved one in making modifications. And then when an accident does occur within the home, an older adult is likely to end up in an emergency room or in the doctor's office. And of those ER docs that we surveyed in the U.S. and Canada, about half of them estimate that these home accidents that they're seeing in the ER can truly be prevented. And they also talked about how having support and assistance in the home is really beneficial for reducing the risk of accidents. I've even seen this within my own family. My grandpa, a few years back, was experiencing a lot of weakness in his knee. He's always been super active and agile, and this weakness in the knee had been causing him to have quite a few near falls, and he had been told by his medical professional he needed to use a cane. And working in the aging field, when I saw him with the cane for the first time, my mind automatically went to home safety. So I encouraged them to install grab bars in the shower, in the bathtub, so that my grandfather could easily get in and out, still able to be independent in his activities of daily living, but making the environment safer. And it took a little convincing. It took some prompting, 1, 2, 3, I think even 4 or 5 times, but eventually they got around to getting those grab bars in, and now he has restored knee function, but they still are so glad that they have that extra support in the bathroom with those grab bars. So sometimes when we're talking with families, when we're talking with older adults about home safety, it's not just a one-time conversation. Sometimes it does take multiple conversations, and hopefully it doesn't take a near fall to put people into action. But it's not. We need to understand that it might not be just a one-time conversation. It's something that might need to be talked about over time. But I mentioned earlier that the effects of aging can put an older adult at a higher risk of accidents or falls within the home. So I like to talk about the effects of aging with the 5 senses. That's something that's very easy to have a conversation about. So if you are talking with a family caregiver, we can ask them to put themselves in the shoes of their loved one to try to understand the effects that aging might have on their safety. So when we talk about eyesight, by the time someone is 60, their pupils have likely decreased to about 1/3 of the size that they were at age 20. So we know that eyesight, as a natural effect of aging, tends to decline over time. It really varies on the person. But there's an increase in aging-related eye conditions as we age, such as cataracts, macular degeneration, and they can cause blurriness and vision issues, which, if you can imagine, if an older adult is trying to navigate the home with poor lighting, throw rugs, electrical cords crossing their pathways, this could cause an accident of some form or another. So our eyesight does impact the risk of falls as we age. And then if you think about smell, our smell can also diminish as we age. So after age 70, because of the loss we have in the nerve endings and within our nose, and we have less mucus, our sense of smell might deteriorate as we age. And the biggest concern here is that an older adult might not be able to smell gas, smoke, burning food, and our sense of smell impacts our sense of taste, which is the next of the 5 senses. So our sense of taste, we start out with over 10,000 taste buds, and they decrease in number and mass as we age. And then also the medications that we take as we age have a potential to impact appetite, which can make an older adult vulnerable to malnutrition. So if we think about the impact that our sense of taste might have, if we can't taste things, maybe we're not as likely to eat things, or we might be eating things that are more salty or sweet, and it could impact our nutrition, our energy levels, which could cause weakness, loss of muscle mass, and safety issues related to falls. And it might also be harmful in that an older adult might not be able to taste spoiled food, so it could put them at a higher risk of potential food poisoning. So when we think about, home safety, of course, the physical environment, but we also need to take into account, the nutrition that they're getting at home, the socialization that they're getting at home as well. So it's kind of a bigger, more holistic picture that I'm trying to paint today. So that's how the sense of taste could impact an older adult's safety as they age. And then there's a sense of touch. As we age, there's a decreased blood flow to the nerve endings, which can reduce an older adult's sensitivity to pain and temperature. Therefore, an older adult might not be able to feel water that is too hot or too cold. Also, losing feeling, especially in the feet or the toes, could lead to unsteady balance or a change in the older adult's gait, which could put them at a risk of falls. And then if there's loss of feeling in our fingers, they might not be able to grab on as tightly to things like grab bars, walkers, canes, and so forth. So you can imagine how that could increase an older adult's risk for falls. And then the final sense is our sense of hearing. And our ears obviously control our hearing, but also our sense of balance, which could be compromised as we age. So older adults might, because of reduced hearing, could miss important visitors. They might also miss out on socialization because they cannot hear the conversation. They might also miss out on hearing a fire alarm, those types of things. So again, when you're thinking about an older adult, we want to take a more holistic approach and really put ourselves in their shoes to understand how aging and how the things that they're dealing with on an individual level could be impacting their risk for accidents or falls within the home. And because we've been talking so much about falls, I did want to place an important emphasis on falls because they are very common. We find that falls are the leading cause of fatal and non-fatal injuries for older adults. 1 in 4 older adults fall each year. Every 11 seconds, an older adult is treated in an emergency room for a fall. And unfortunately, every 19 minutes, an older adult passes away from a complication of a fall. So this is a very pertinent issue. And a lot of the older adults that I work with, they have a fear of falling. They do not want to fall. We know that falls can cause serious injury, so it could result in a hip fracture, broken bones, head injuries. In fact, more than 2.8 million older adults are treated in the emergency room, again, because of falls. It results in hundreds of thousands of hospitalizations, and these hospitalizations can be costly. So not only are falls common, they can cause serious injury, but they can also be very costly. We know that the average hospital cost for a fall is around $30,000. And this is obviously a large chunk of change, but also a fall, we have to account for kind of the priceless aspects of a fall, meaning it can impact the individual's quality of life after they fall, not only because of a physical injury, but it could cause additional anxiety, fear of falling. It could prevent them from engaging in future physical activity. It could cause depression, social isolation if they're not able to get out and about due to a fear of falling or due to a limited mobility because of a fall. So really the costs are both, come with a dollar sign, and some costs you can't really account for. But this does impact an older adult in various aspects. But also, it impacts the caregivers. Research has shown that after a fall, their primary caregiver reports an increase in caregiver burden, a fear of their loved one falling again, and can also cause depression in the caregiver as well. So it impacts both the older adult and their caregiver. And we know that there are kind of 3 categories of risk factors for a fall. First, the physical risk factors, that change in the body that it occurs as we age, which I've gone over. And the behavioral risk factors. These are the things that we do or do not do that it could increase the risk of falls. For example, not using a walker or cane or a assistive walking device after a physician has recommended or prescribed that for the individual, that is a behavioral risk factor. So again, it's the things we we might do or might not do that could increase our risk for falls. And then there's the environmental risk factors, those hazards in the home and community that could increase our risk of falls. And we're going to talk about that here in just a few minutes. But some additional risk factors, we know that falls are more common with increasing age. Also, if an individual has already fallen, they have a higher likelihood of falling again. So if we can prevent that one fall from happening, then it could prevent multiple falls in the future. And then those that are dependent on someone else for assistance with their activities of daily living, they are at a higher risk of falls. Also those with visual impairment, which we talked a little bit about earlier. But the good news is there are some things older adults can do in terms of their lifestyle that can reduce their risk for falls and go a long way in preventing them. So when we think about fall prevention, a senior's movement or older adult's movement and the way they get around can really impact their risk. And to improve the mobility, there are some simple but effective things that can be done. So first of all, of course, physical activity. This goes a long way towards fall prevention. So with a doctor's approval, families should encourage their loved one to be active. Activities such as walking, water aerobics, Tai Chi, stretching, even dancing or, getting up and walking about the house, some chair exercises are all great for maintaining mobility. And it's also important to think about those activities that can improve our balance, our strength, coordination, flexibility. Again, can go a long way in preventing falls. Another thing to keep in mind is that I mentioned this earlier, a fall could prevent future physical activity because they might be afraid to fall again. But, this is a great opportunity to talk to the older adult's physician, medical provider to see if perhaps we can work with a physical therapist, an occupational therapist to regain mobility, to regain strength in a controlled environment where the older adult feels safe so that they don't lose that flexibility, that mobility, that strength in their muscles. And then sometimes family caregivers unknowingly prohibit their loved one from getting some extra exercise throughout the day. Just a quick example, if you're a caregiver and your loved one asks you to go grab something for them in the bedroom or, can you go out and get the mail for me? Naturally, caregivers want to jump in and help, I find a lot of times. But if the older adult is able to get up and do those things on their own, it would be another opportunity for them to increase their mobility throughout the day. So just something to keep in mind as family caregivers. And then we know that medications can also impact the risk of falls. Some medications or a combination of medications can have side effects such as dizziness, drowsiness, and it can make falling more likely. So if a new medication is being started for an older adult, it's important to understand the side effects and also to monitor any side effects that occur once a new medication is started, and making sure that the whole medication list is reviewed by a medical professional or pharmacist on a regular basis to ensure that there's no risky side effects or negative drug interactions that could put an older adult at risk of falls. So while there are several risk factors, there's also a lot of things we can do for prevention. And we've talked about the physical risk factors. We've talked a little bit about behavioral. So I'm going to now go through some of the environmental risks that might exist and provide some tips on how to make the home environment safer. So I'm going to walk through the various rooms of the home, and you can do the same thing online at makinghomesaferforseniors.com. It's a great interactive tool where you can click on each room of the home. You can click on the outside as well, and it'll take you through some of the common hazards that you can find that could increase a risk for injury or accidents. I'm going to go over 4 of the rooms today for the sake of time, but again, you can go back to makinghomesaferforseniors.com and click through each and every room. But I'm I'm going to start with the living room. Most of the time when you enter into a home, you're entering into the living room, and this is where we find older adults spend a good amount of time. So when we think about the living room setup, we want to make sure that the living room is set up in a way that there are clear pathways through the living room to the kitchen, clear pathways for the older adult to get to their beloved couch or chair. I want to make sure that there is adequate lighting. So if we look at this kind of cluttered room, you can see that there might be some potential hazards. So you can see a rug on the floor that looks a little bunched up. We want to make sure that rugs, while they are beautiful and they do serve a great purpose, want to make sure that they are secure and not creating falling or tripping hazards. There's some easy things you can do. Double-sided tape works really well in keeping the rug secured to the floor. If it is a precious family rug that's been passed down or was bought on a trip that has special memories, perhaps suggesting turning it into a wall hanging or moving it to a room of the house where it can still be beautiful, but maybe that room isn't used as often. Can go a long way in making sure that the older adult has a say in where that rug goes or what happens to the rug, but also their safety is top of mind. Also, a lot of times in living room setups, there are lamps, which is great because sometimes living rooms have inadequate lighting. Perhaps they don't have overhead lighting, so you need to bring in some lighting, especially during those darker months of the year. But the cords might be crossing pathways. So you might want to evaluate, is there a way to run the cord behind the couch? Or, pardon me, can we tape the cord down with tape to make it a smoother surface for the individual to walk over? And you might even need to rearrange the furniture a little bit to allow for more for wider pathways or for just more of an easy setup within the room. So those are some tips. Again, you can go online and click on all of these pink targets. Each of these targets have a little piece of education behind them on how you can make that aspect of the room safer. But we know the majority of accidents happen in the kitchen and in the bathroom. So those are the next two rooms of the house that I'm going to go through. So this particular kitchen setup, you can see one potential hazard, burning pots on the stove. Of course, we want to make sure that the stove is a safe cooking assistive device for individuals who have cognitive impairment. Families might want to consider a special stove switch or knobs that might prohibit an individual from turning on the stove if they're not able to maneuver the stove in a safe way. Also, the kitchen looks very dark. A lot of times kitchens have pretty good lighting. However, when it comes to the counters, sometimes it's nice to put a light up underneath the cabinet that the older adult can turn on and off to create a more well-lit surface space while they are chopping and stirring, those types of things. We can also encourage the older adult to create a workstation where they can easily access everything that they need. So this workstation might be a place where they can sit down and stir and chop if they get easily fatigued and they cannot stand for long periods of time. The workstation might also take all the utensils in the kitchen that they use most frequently and put them in a spot that they can easily reach them. For example, if usually the pots and pans are stored in the very bottom drawer or underneath the oven, if the older adult can't easily bend down and pick up a heavy pot, consider a pot rack that you can put up against the wall where they can hang their favorite pots and pans that they use most frequently. Or if it's The baking items have always been on the top shelf of the cabinet, but the individual needs a step stool to access those. Can we rearrange the kitchen a little bit to move those baking supplies to a spot where a step stool is not needed? We see that step stools can, of course, increase the risk of a fall. And then any sharp objects, as you can see all those knives and utensils displayed there, make sure that they are secured and in a safe spot, but also can be easily accessed. So again, just some tips here for the kitchen. And again, you can go online and look at some additional hazards that might exist there. The next room of the home is the bathroom. This is where they find about 69% of all home injuries occur in the bathroom, and you can imagine why. A lot of times it's slippery because people are getting in and out of the shower or the bathtub. When you look at this picture, you can see that, again, the medications are stored up on the shelf. For an individual that might not be able to easily reach that, we might want to move those items. Also, that shower curtain rod looks like it's pulling away from the wall a little bit. That might have been because the individual slipped and grabbed onto the shower curtain and kind of yanked the shower rack down with them. We want to make sure that, in bathrooms, rugs can be very helpful in preventing slips and falls. But again, we want to make sure that the rug is secured to the floor. So purchasing a rug with a rubber bottom or, again, that double-sided tape can help secure the rug to the floor. Also, this is a great place for grab bars. I mentioned earlier how my grandparents have installed grab bars by the shower and the tub. The toilet is another great area to have a grab bar, or finding a toilet seat riser that will bring the stool up a little bit higher so the older adult doesn't have to exert as much energy to pull themselves up. That's an area I see towel bars coming off the walls quite often, is because an individual is using the towel bar as a grab bar, but we know towel bars aren't made for that amount of pressure, and so oftentimes those towel racks, you might see those starting to come apart from the wall. That might be a good indicator that there's a need for a grab bar in that location. Again, when we think about the home, if we can put ourselves in our loved one's shoes and kind of maybe even follow them around a little bit in a nonchalant way to see, what things are they using within the kitchen? What things are they using in the bathroom, so that you can help create a safe environment. And then finally, I'll just walk through the bedroom quickly. We know that bedrooms are a place that older adults likely use on a daily basis, and so we want to make sure that the environment is set up in a way that is safe. We want to make sure that there's no clutter on the floors. Oftentimes, clothing can be dropped. It might be magazines or newspapers that are by the side of the bed on the floor. But want to make sure that the pathways are clear. Another common kind of home safety technique that I've seen some families use is making sure that the pathway from the bedroom to the bathroom is well lit at night. It might be installing some night lights near the bathroom door, or even rope lighting that can be turned on and off to light a pathway to the door. Because again, at night, an older adult might be more likely to be groggy, still a little sleepy when they get up to go to the restroom, so it could increase the risk of falls. There's also great kind of grab bars that you can purchase that slide under the mattress that provide a little extra support. You can also elevate the entire bed. You can buy risers for each leg. I've seen them at your average hardware store. You can create a higher bed height by placing a riser under each, and that's a pretty simple fix as opposed to getting an entirely new bed. So again, want to make sure that you rearrange any furniture that could get in the way of navigating about safely. But again, put yourself in the shoes of the older adult, watch how they navigate through the environment, and then look for opportunities to improve the safety based on their daily routines. So again, you can go to makinghomesaferforseniors.com to go through this whole simulation. There's also a free downloadable checklist that will take you through all the rooms of the home with additional suggestions. But I just wanted to kind of sum up the safety concerns that I've already touched on. I want to make sure there's adequate lighting in all areas of the home that are being used most frequently, especially hallways, staircases. Those aren't always places that have the best lighting. We also want to make sure that clutter is reduced, and it could be even just newspapers, magazines that pile up at the top of the stairs that do need to be taken out for recycling. But again, we need to think through could that be a potential safety hazard? As far as surfaces go, if there's a lot of hardwood floors and if rugs are starting to become an issue, non-skid socks or shoes worn throughout the home can go a long way in preventing any sort of slips or falls. And then when we look at staircases, we want to make sure that they have the proper handrails and proper lighting. I've also seen families have good success with using colorful duct tape and placing it on the edge of each stair, or if it's an outdoor staircase, painting the cement, the edge of the cement stair so that there's a clear visual distinction between each step, and that can help reduce the number of falls. Also, if there is a rug anywhere throughout the home, but especially sometimes I see them at the bottom of a staircase, one, that could be a slipping hazard if the rug is not secured to the floor. But for individuals with cognitive impairment, they might see that rug as an obstacle, as a hole, a black hole that isn't safe to step on. So when somebody has some sort of cognitive impairment, there's a whole kind of another level of home safety that might be required, but it's those little things that families might not think about, such as the patterns on the floor on a floor rug might be a little visually confusing, those types of things. And then accessibility, we've talked about that already, making sure that supplies, medication, foods are stored at a height that doesn't require an older adult to bend over too much or reach up or get up on the step stool as is pictured on the slide here, making sure that everything is very accessible to the individual. Again, that helps maintain their independence when they are able to access everything that they need and they don't have to ask for someone to retrieve an item for them. And then making sure chemicals and tools are properly stored. And then sometimes the trash, while this seems kind of like something that maybe families wouldn't consider, trash bags, if you get a tall kitchen bag full of trash, sometimes that can be pretty heavy. So I've seen families have success by having smaller trash cans, maybe in the kitchen, in the bathroom. It might require more bags to be taken out, but they're not as heavy for the older adult to lift and take to the garage or to wherever the trash is disposed of. So again, little things that you can do throughout the home to ease the routine, again, enhance the independence. That's going to go a long way in preventing a fall or an accident in the home. I do also want to touch next on our furry friends that are in the home. While they make great companions, they can pose a bit of a safety concern for some older adults. More than 21,000 older Americans are treated in the emergency room each year due to falls associated with their pets. Mainly this is dogs and cats. That comes from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And while that's not an overwhelming number, it does go to show that accidents can happen from interacting with pets, having pets in the home. And those are things we want to avoid. So safety concerns when it comes to pets, obviously there's potential for tripping hazard. It might be the animal kind of lurking around the feet, or even pet toys or pet supplies left throughout the house that an individual might trip over or have the opportunity to trip over. Also, if an If a dog is untrained or allowed to jump up on the individual, that could pose a safety concern. I know when my brother first got his puppy, he brought it over to see my grandma, and she was so excited, but the dog started to kind of jump up, and I could see her losing her balance a little bit. So we made sure that she sat down and interacted with the dog so that that wasn't an issue anymore. Also, the woman pictured here has two pups and is taking them out for a walk. And in those scenarios, there is a potential for getting tangled up in the leash, again, creating a tripping hazard, especially on those icy, snowy days where an older adult might be taking their pet out for a walk. If an older adult, if the dog takes off, it could lead to a trip or fall, something of that nature. So perhaps the older adult can walk the pet when it's great and sunny outside, but maybe in the winter months, families consider having someone come over and walk the dogs for them just to prevent any slipping and falling in inclement weather. Another thing to consider when talking about pets in the home is really to have a conversation with the older adult. Involve them in the conversation. Watch the interactions that they're having with their pet. And again, consider getting help. Maybe it's the neighbor that's helping to walk. You can hire a home care company, a dog walker. These days, I know there's a dog walking app even where you can schedule a dog walker to come to your home. So it's not necessarily that the pet has to be removed from the home, but it's what are things that families can do to make pet safety, pets, and keep the pet in the home or reduce home safety issues. And then also encouraging to be on the lookout for pet items around the house, maybe keep them to one area of the home. That way it reduces the risk of tripping and falling. Just a few more considerations for pets. If the family and the older adult decide that it's really no longer safe to have an individual with a pet, put that pet up for adoption. Maybe it's a friend, relative that takes in the pet, or maybe the pet goes to a shelter where they're adopted out. Or maybe finding an alternative option for the individual to interact with pets. Maybe they are engaged in a pet therapy program. Maybe they are able to donate pet items or give their time at a local shelter or visit the local shelter and interact with pets in that environment. And some people even, especially those with cognitive impairment, dementia, they might benefit from having a robotic companion. I know that there are dogs and cats out there that are robotic and simulate a dog, and even a seal named Paro has been shown to have positive clinical outcomes when it comes to kind of pet interaction. And safety, again, is top of mind, and oftentimes caregivers feel guilty about removing a pet from the home, which is completely natural. But if family caregivers can try to reduce the guilt by having the conversation with the older adult, involving them in a solution to keep them connected to animals, hopefully that can help reduce the guilt. So that's just a quick hit on pet safety. In January, I'll be doing an entire presentation on pets and seniors, so I hope you'll join then. But I did want to touch quickly on barriers to home safety. We can talk all we want about home safety and making the home safer, reducing the risk, being preventative, but sometimes we're just met with certain barriers. And so I wanted to kind of go over some of the barriers that I've seen over the years. And the first is that older adults can be fiercely independent. They may not want to admit that they need help or admit that they need assistance. So a solution to this would be to explain the reasons for the need for a home modification, for support, and approach it in a positive way. Again, with the lens of helping to maintain independence and also sharing alternatives. If the living environment isn't modified, will the older adult be able to stay there? If not, what are the options? Maybe it's a move to another living situation. And sometimes it takes an outsider making a recommendation, such as a physician or a family friend, that helps to reinforce the need for home modifications or the need for assistance. Older adults might not also want to make the modifications because of the aesthetic look of the home, but today they make really fancy looking grab bars and other assistive devices that look nicer, that kind of blend into their surroundings. So again, talking about the reasons for the need for home modifications and trying to focus on the benefits of it instead of the look of it can hopefully help overcome those barriers. And sometimes an older adult might have a fear of asking for help because they feel it will indicate to their adult child or their loved one that they cannot handle living on their own. So therefore, they might think it will lead to an expedited nursing home placement or assisted living placement. So that's why the conversation around home safety and why it is important can hopefully help offset those fears. So an older adult child could approach the conversation with the lens of, we want to make these modifications and improvements so that we can help keep you here and keep you safe in this environment and to prolong a move. So again, taking that approach might help families be more successful in this conversation. And then older adults might also have an emotional connection to some of the hazards within the home. I mentioned the throw rug example earlier. And so you can try to find alternate uses for those hazardous items, suggesting to move it to another area of the home that is less frequently used, or donating the item to somebody who is in need. I've had one family say that there was a piece of furniture in the home that was really creating a hazard, and the way they approached it was there was a younger family member who was moving into their first home, and they said, wouldn't it be great if you could give them this item to start their new life together in this home? And then that helped really solve two issues. It gave the new homeowners a piece of furniture and also removed the hazard from the home, but also made the individual feel like they were contributing to someone else by donating that item. And then finally, cognitive impairment and dementia can sometimes be a barrier to home safety. An older adult might not be cognizant of the hazards in the home or may forget to report accidents or may forget to engage in an activity that would, in a safer way, that sort of thing. So sometimes families have to get creative in their home safety solutions or might need to bring in more assistance to keep the individual safe at home. And then finally, inaccessibility. Some individuals cannot afford to make modifications to the home, and some living environments might not be conducive to aging in place. So in a little bit, I'll share some resources around the funding side of home modifications. But quickly, just want to touch on how to communicate this topic of home safety. So I know I'm running short on time and I have some more slides to get through, so I'm going to touch on this quickly. But again, creating a positive conversation around home safety will hopefully go a long way, and involving the older adult in the conversation so that they contribute their ideas, they can be part of the solution will hopefully help to get their buy-in in terms of making modifications to the home. So we want to ensure that we're not arguing, want to maintain the dignity and respect of the older adult, make it more of a team approach by including the individual. You might also have to include kind of that third party, a physician perspective. Maybe it's a certified aging in place specialist, that sort of thing. And then also be empathetic and listen to the older adult's concerns and not always make assumptions about what they're feeling or they're thinking. Again, involve them in the conversation. So hopefully that can go a long way. I also wanted to bring up some new kind of technology innovations that relate to home safety. I know that we live in a digital age, and because home safety is becoming more of an important and popular topic, there are more and more pieces of technology being created that can help people age in place longer. So I wanted to share just a couple of the latest technology innovations. Some of them have been around for a while. Some of them might kind of be out of the box thinking as a piece of technology that can help with home safety. But I do want to just mention that, technology can never replace the human touch. It can never replace fully a caregiver in the home. It helps really to enhance the caregiving experience. So sometimes families think that if they implement a piece of technology, it's going to solve all the problems. It might not be the case. But again, here is just some suggestions. So the first are pill dispensers. There's a variety of pill dispensers on the market that could take away any confusion of managing medications at home. And sometimes we see individuals having to move out of the home simply because they can't manage their medication on their own. So finding a pill dispenser can be helpful with that medication management. Also, video doorbells as another smart technology that enables the homeowner to see who's coming to the door via the telephone. So this can go a long way in terms of safety of an older adult who might be living alone. That video doorbell could be hooked up to the family caregiver so that they know, okay, it's just a package being delivered, or I've never seen this person before. I'm concerned. I'm going to give my loved one a call, make sure that they're not falling victim to a scam, something of that sort. There's also voice and remote controlled thermostats that can help maintain the temperature in a home, making sure that it's cool enough in the summer months, warm enough in the winter months. And a lot of those, digital monitoring systems can also incorporate smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, which again are important for home safety. There's also virtual assistants like Amazon Echo, Google Homes that can allow homeowners to control their environment with just their voice. It can help with locking doors, turning lights on and off, adjusting that thermostat. It can be hooked up to cameras, maybe outside or inside, but it can also help with some of the more kind of fun side of things, like enabling music, getting an update on the weather, adding items to a shopping cart, that sort of thing. I've also heard of families using an Alexa or something of that nature in replace of an emergency response system and as a way for their older adult loved one to call out for help if needed. And there's also stove fire prevention devices. These devices can automatically shut off a stove if it's left unattended for a certain amount of time, or can be a lock on a stove knob. So I would just go out and Google stove fire prevention device. I know it's kind of a tongue twister, but there are lots of options out there for that. Some additional innovations, adaptive tools for inside and outside. Sometimes it can be hard for an older adult to maintain hobbies that they enjoy, or such as gardening or cooking, and there are adaptive tools that can accommodate somebody who perhaps has arthritis. So certain garden tools that make that activity safer, or tools in the kitchen that can help somebody that has arthritis, has Parkinson's disease, or has a vision loss, that sort of thing. So there are adaptive tools that can be used. Also, home monitoring systems. I've already kind of gone over that a little bit, but there are home monitoring systems for health as well that can help regulate a person's weight. It can take their blood pressure, those types of things. Again, can help caregivers monitor those things remotely. Also, amplified phones, phones with features for an extra loud ringer or extra loud voice volume. There are phones that can translate what the person is saying into text that somebody can read. Also, phones that light up when they ring if somebody does have hearing issues. And then there are tools for fun, like adaptive card holders for those who like card games. books with large print, that sort of thing. And then also, again, those fall alarms, those personal emergency response systems can go a long way in detecting a fall. Many of those have the capability for GPS tracking if an individual falls outside of the home, but also GPS tracking systems can be helpful for those that do wander due to a cognitive impairment. So they have bracelets. I've even heard of ones that have something that can attach to a shoe, that sort of thing. So those are just a few technology innovations, but there are so many resources that exist. So I'm going to go through 4 sets of slides here quickly on resources. First, here's some 5 fixes under $500. I hope you download the slides. They're available to use. You can go in more detail at makinghomesafer.com. These fixes are on there along with that free home safety checklist. And then also we talked earlier about sometimes people have issues funding these home modifications. So majority of them are private pay fixes, but there are some low interest loans. Some organizations might provide home improvement grants. Free labor might come from a nonprofit or a volunteer organization, maybe a faith-based community. And then there are some organizations that do equipment loans, whether it's a wheelchair or a ramp for the home. An organization in your community might loan that out to you. So there are some resources on the right-hand side where you might be able to get funding or more information on funding solutions for some of these home modifications. There's another great resource, homeyourownway.com, and you can take a quiz to see if the current home the individual is living in would be set up for them to age in place. There are additional tips for funding home remodeling, fixes under $1,000, and some just additional great information on homeyourownway.com. And then I'll leave this slide up here as we take maybe just 1 or 2 questions. I apologize for taking so long. There's just so much great information. But we have free home safety checklists, home safety assessment tools. The National Safety Council has some great information. Local area agencies on aging are also a great place. Some of those organizations have volunteer programs. And then you might want to reach out to an occupational therapist. They can come to the home and usually for a fee, but can help the older adult assess their living environment and suggest improvements. And I do have one last slide. I'll leave this one up. There's suggestions for fall prevention, a guide for caregivers. Driving is also a home safety concern that we didn't even get to touch on today. And then also there are free smoke detectors that the Red Cross and a lot of local fire departments will provide. There's a automatic stove shutoff. I have not personally used that, but wanted to let you know that that is out there. And then that certified aging in place specialist might also be another great resource that you can go to for home modifications and tips for aging in place. So with that, Steve, I'll turn it over to you maybe just for one question, but I thank everyone for joining me today, and I hope that you visit those resources to get more information.
Great, thanks, Lakeland. Yes, let's do a question or 2 here if we can. First one here, how do you help convince an older adult that grab bars or other home adjustments are needed for safety and independence when he or she is resistant to such changes?
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, approaching it from a proactive standpoint, sometimes having a physician make the recommendation, that makes it kind of a third party. Sometimes that generation sees physicians as more of an authority figure, might be open to that. Also, asking them to help pick out the grab bar. Again, it could be that they don't like the look of it, letting them know that, there's the grab bar, or maybe it's a toilet seat riser with some side handles. It's something that is not permanent, that could come off maybe if there are guests, something of that sort. Again, trying to get to the root cause of why they're resistant to that change. And maybe it is because they feel like it's impeding on their independence. But creating a message behind it of, this will help you maintain your independence, help prevent a fall, or even sharing a story of somebody that you know who had a fall, wishing they would have had grab bars, or somebody who has recently installed them and really enjoys them, finds that they are helpful, can go a long way. And sometimes you can approach it from an angle of, well, let's install it for 30 days, and if you don't find it helpful, then we can reevaluate, that sort of thing. So kind of a trial period, if you will. There are ones that do also suction. I'm leery about those just because sometimes you're unsure if they're not properly installed. The suction might give out. So you want to look at ones that are a little more permanent. But again, there's those nice toilet seat risers that have the side handles that prevent you from having to drill into the wall, but also will provide some extra support. So I hope that is helpful, and best of luck in that conversation. It's never easy, but you might also want to check out the Fall Prevention Conversation Guide because really it is also a fall prevention conversation as well.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Lakeland. It's time for us to wrap up for today's webinar, but thanks for joining us today and presenting. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.